welcome everybody to the meeting. We're obviously in hybrid form, and just a reminder that the meeting is being webcast and members of the public will be able to view us today. So welcome to any members of the public who are watching. Couple of other things to say. Delighted to have Linda Shillor with us, who's going to speak to item number 5 about the Innovation Board. Linda's our new chair. And if board members are happy, then I've asked Linda to stay, particularly in relation to item number 4 because of its relevance, but for the whole meeting if people are happy for that to be the case. Great. Also want to welcome Martin in his new role as Chief Executive, and I also want to recognise and thank Dave Petley because this is your last Let Board meeting and you're moving on obviously to pastures new out of the region, but thank you genuinely for your contribution to the Let Board, Dave. It's very much appreciated. Before we begin the formal agenda item, I also need to mention number 7, the Environmental Sustainability Plan. It is a really important discussion, but with reflection, we've decided that we're going to bring that item back when it's had a bit more time to be worked up more fully and some further engagement from the LEP. So we're not going to speak about that item today. We're going to do some further work on it and bring it back to a future meeting. And I think that's everything in relation to welcomes and apologies. I'll keep my eye on those of you that are on the screen as well. But if we can move to item number 2, to declarations of interest, can I ask if people have got any in relation to any agenda items, please? Okay. And in relation to any activity since the last formal meeting, and in relation to any forthcoming activity. And okay, what I haven't done in my haste is just ask you to list the apologies. Would you mind just doing that for us for the record as well?
For apologies, we have Neil MacDonald, Joe Chetcuti, Dan Fell, Alexa Greaves, Gemma Smith, Kathy Travers, Councillor Terry Foulkes, and Councillor Steve Holton, but Councillor Chris Lamb is here in his place.
Can I submit apologies from Jones as well? She's not available today.
Thank you. Okay, can we take item number 3, the notes of the last meeting, please, dated the 12th of May. Can I ask if people have got any omissions, errors, comments, or if people are happy to accept those as a true record of the meeting? People happy? Okay, that's great. So we'll move on swiftly to item number 4, which is the Health and Wellbeing Assets Review. Paul Johnson's going to introduce it, but Richard Stubbs is going to assist with the presentation as well, and Richard's on the screen. Okay, thanks, Paul.
Morning, everyone. I won't take long. So this is for the health and wellbeing. We recognised a gap in our evidence base, so we commissioned a report to look at this in terms of improving our understanding of the sector, but also looking at our challenges, but more importantly, opportunities to grow the sector. And Richard's got some slides he's going to talk through, so I'll hand over to Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. Really sorry that I can't be there in person today. I'm afraid it's a National Institute for Health Research steering board in the wilds of High Wycombe. I think I'd rather be back in the north. But this is a really important topic for me. I've only got about 8 slides, so hopefully just to set up a conversation. But this is a sector that I think we talk about a lot in South Yorkshire, and obviously dear to my heart, given my day job running an academic health science network. We talk about the potential for growth, but I think to date, probably without a detailed understanding of the sector itself, its global significance, and probably most importantly, where South Yorkshire fits into that UK ecosystem, and can we create a compelling narrative and a vision of the potential future for our region. Before I go into the detail of the analysis, I think it's a sector that's really ripe for confusion, I think particularly if you don't work in health. So I just wanted to address that slightly so that hopefully we can come to this on the same page. So when we talk about health and well-being, it's, I think, very easy as a layperson to conflate that with our NHS and our care sector delivery infrastructure. And even though it's really important to have a thriving research-orientated health delivery infrastructure, that's not really what I want us to focus on today. The second confusion, I think, is that amongst the wider social determinants of health, having a good job is the biggest indicator of future health outcomes. So obviously, crucially, jobs play an important part within our ambition to increase life expectancy, but that's all jobs, not just jobs in life sciences, medtech and wellbeing. So yes, we can benefit our health by increasing high value jobs in this sector, but I think when we talk about the benefits of this sector in particular, it's the innovation that the sector produces and its proximity to our citizens that's the benefit that we really want to focus on. Jobs are great, but we need to talk about the innovation that the sector produces. And the third confusion for me is we obviously want to support this sector because it can have a local impact on improving the way that we deliver services in the NHS, but that's only a very small micro lens. This isn't primarily about saying let's have a growing life sciences and medtech sector so that South Yorkshire organisations can deliver care better, although obviously that's of benefit. Really, it's about saying we need to support this sector locally because of the growing national and international markets within health tech innovation. So I think the example I would always give is with something like the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre, and I chair that organisation, so just to declare interest, but is it here to benefit our local NHS primarily? Well, in part, but it's actually here to benefit UK citizens and hopefully global citizens too. So when we think about the impact of this sector, this is not about simply giving a leg up to our local NHS organisations. This is truly a significant national asset that we're talking about increasing. So what I want to focus on, well, the health innovation sector is a globally significant market. I think in South Yorkshire, we could consider ourselves to be slightly behind the curve, especially compared to some of our northern regions, but we do have an opportunity to inject ambition, vision and support into this emerging ecosystem and create a globally significant cluster of health-orientated companies. So hopefully that's got everyone onto the right page of why this is important and not to conflate it with our fantastic NHS, although it is an important part of this jigsaw. So as the HSN in particular, we've worked with a number of regions and seen the benefit, particularly in Leeds City region about 6 years ago, of a science and innovation audit. Really crucial piece of work locally, which enabled a hugely greater understanding of the region's medtech sector, its strengths and its unique capabilities. And I think crucially that science and innovation audit then led to a strong development of a narrative, both to investors and to government who are interested in powering up the region. And actually, in my wider footprint role, I still draw upon a lot of the evidence that that science and innovation audit produced in terms of banging the drum for why Yorkshire is an investable proposition on this region. We didn't have the same kind of analysis of our own patch in South Yorkshire. So we saw the importance of starting to create that narrative to support our growth ambitions, enable stronger conversations with potential investors and innovators who are interested in coming to the region and inform our future planning around developing and growing our strengths and our capabilities in this area. But as I said, we knew that our current understanding wasn't sufficient. We know that health and wellbeing is one of the region's greatest strengths, but we were lacking firm numbers to back up many of our thoughts. So this work was initiated with a conversation with our colleagues in the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, and thank you very much to Paul and Ruth in particular. And it was based on some initial desktop-based work, and then we put that work out to tender and published the detailed study, a snapshot of which you've got in your packs. So that's how we got to where we got to from here, and hopefully a little bit about why it's important. So the study sought to map our sector assets, its size, our economic output, identify our key health and wellbeing strengths and opportunities, and also identify factors that are holding us back both now and probably more importantly in the future, and how we should seek to address them through a detailed action plan. Now, this kind of goes back to my point about not getting too conflated about what we're talking about here. Health and wellbeing can have a really broad definition. And in identifying our region's assets, the work only focused on those assets that have a current or a future potential to engage in and support research and/or innovation activities and contribute to our region's overall economic growth. So based on that definition, the asset map shown on the slides there was produced, and as you'd expect, it does show a cluster of activity in Sheffield, but also highlights broader assets across the rest of the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. I think it's also worth pointing out here, of course, that this is assets that would label themselves as particularly health and wellbeing specific, but there are also really obviously very tangential but related assets such as the Digital Media Centre in Barnsley, which I would consider to also be of secondary benefit to a map such as this. This slide is probably the closest slide that we've got to starting our own detailed science and innovation audits that I talked about we doing in the Leeds City region, starting to show some of the findings and the numbers that hopefully as we drill down deeper we can then use in our own narrative to understand ourselves why this is an investable proposition, but perhaps more crucially talk to government about it. So findings such as 3.3 billion pounds of GVA, £1 in every £8 spent in South Yorkshire, help to demonstrate the current size of the sector and how important it is to our economy. Other findings, the number of businesses, number of people employed in the sector, strengthen that importance, not only to the region, but also to the citizens of the South Yorkshire, many of whom, of course, are employed by the sector. If you kind of just zoom out slightly and think about a wider lens, we've got more health and life sciences companies across Yorkshire and Humber than in Oxford and Cambridge combined. We need to obviously recognise that by and large those assets, those companies are slightly underpowered at the moment, but there is a baseline of opportunity that we could grasp if we have the right ambition. So the study found that our region has 5 key strengths around health and wellbeing, areas that we should focus upon as part of developing our future pitch, and should also be focused on in terms of supporting and growing our future development plans. So medical devices, surgical and medical equipment in particular, and a long history of manufacturing in that particular sector. Software, gaming, more and more is becoming very integral to how we can deliver innovative solutions to patients. Wellbeing and healthy aging, infectious diseases, neuroscience, children's health, and colleagues will probably know that we are hopefully further down the road in terms of building the National Centre for Child Health Technology on the Olympic Legacy Park, and also oncology. They're all identified as key strengths of ours for the region. And then also some challenges. What is holding us back? What's going to hold us back in the future? I think one of the main findings suggested that while this sector is large and broad in terms of our capabilities, it is quite poorly connected, to put it quite politely. And even within the sector, there's a really poor understanding of our regional breadths and our strengths. There's obviously more work to be done to promote the sector, not just nationally and internationally, but also within the region itself. We need to join more of our system up with itself. I think at the moment we could probably challenge ourselves as to whether we can actually call it an ecosystem or a cluster. We have a disparate set of assets that need to be linked up and need to understand ourselves better. So we've recommended 4 areas within the study to focus upon as part of the future plans. They're all there, I won't go through them, but if you look at some of the stuff that sits underneath them as part of specific actions, largely revolving around better communication with our sectors and its strengths to investors and innovators interested in coming to the region. I'll just say that as somebody who works at that wider footprint, doing exactly this piece of work, compared to other colleagues across the north, South Yorkshire doesn't have a front door, it doesn't have a red carpet. So when you're thinking about trying to bring in with investment in along this space, it's a difficult place to bring it because we don't know how to react as one to the opportunities. We need to support skills development locally, obviously, within our current and our future work and health and wellbeing workforce, and create that stronger innovation ecosystem, which means innovators can flourish within our region. And hopefully, and this will move us, I think, onto item 5 when we get there, all of this work chimes with that broader ambition that we have with our innovation board. So in terms of what's next, obviously we've got a great deal of valuable insights into the sector, our size and our strengths, which is useful. This study hasn't gone anywhere near as deeply as a science and innovation audit would, but I think it's a useful first step in trying to understand the lay of the land and starting to work out the pillars of a narrative that would help us to understand this better and crucially start to work out what the proposition could be for investment. There's an accompanying action plan that focuses on steps needed to build the assets, support them to grow, and hopefully the new innovation board will take responsibility for these findings, translate them into a more specific action plan for the Mayoral Combined Authority, and lead on it in conjunction with partners. The findings will obviously also be used across other areas of the LEP, the Mayoral Combined Authority, the AHSN, our South Yorkshire Innovation Hub, and many other places to provide a stronger regional narrative for us to build upon. So Lucy, I think that's all from me. Happy to be part of the conversation if possible in a hybrid sense, but I know we've got Paul, we've got Ruth, and also Sean from the HSN has joined you in person, so hopefully a good discussion to have.
Lovely, thank you, Richard. We've got an echo. All right, really important and useful presentation, I think. I'm sure colleagues will have comments, maybe questions for Richard, so I'll open that up for people. Can't see any hands. Go on, Oliver.
Hello, apologies for being late as well. I was with McLaren visiting their factory, which was amazing. I just wanted to focus in on, Richard, on the point you made about narrative, brand, front door, etc. And I've now had this conversation, I think, with a number of people, not least people in this room, about how we need to make that happen relatively swiftly. And this feels like a really important piece of that jigsaw. So I just want to say thank you for the piece of work and just kind of reassure colleagues and people in the room that piece of work will be happening, and we will focus on that as a priority, because it seems like a gap that has been noticed by all too many people, and I continue to have this conversation routinely, and we need to actually get on and sort it out. So we will work on that, and we will come back to you and ask for your advice and opinions as we do.
Thank you, Oliver. Any other comments, questions from colleagues? Linda, is it? I mean, we will pick up obviously some of this under the next item, but very happy for you to make any comments if you have anything to say now.
I'm told, right. Sorry, first time with the technology. I thought that was absolutely fascinating, actually, and there are so many parallels, it strikes me, with what the Innovation Board will try to, sort of draw together, facilitate and enable. Thank you, Oliver, for making the point about like, sort of what we tell the world about the region, its capabilities and what we do. Because I think whether it's the Innovation Board, the presentation we've just heard, or I suspect the next one, I think that will be an absolute sort of key theme that's going through it. It's really difficult to sell a region to overseas investors, people who want to bring their businesses here and actually sort of grow them or even start them if you actually sort of haven't got a great story to tell the world. And it struck me that, sort of right from the get-go, when I came in and started to look at this, that actually that was something that, is an absolute priority for us to do. But I think, I say, for me, what was fascinating was just the parallels, the innovation. I mean, actually defining it in the region is going to be really interesting, because it is a really broad church. We've got a whole massive deep area that we've just seen sort of, presented to us now. You can go on to the environment, you can go to sustainability. We're not even talking about engineering, what we do in education. So this is absolutely massive, and I think it's going to be really critical that the Innovation Board is tapping into everything that's already going on, not reinventing the wheel, but also bringing that knowledge and expertise in, so that we're really honed and we're really focused on being like, that catalyst and that enabler.
Okay, any comments? I think there's a hand on screen and I can't see. Am I right?
Yeah,
yes.
You are, absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I have been probably thrown in at the deep end a little bit, and I've only had an hour or so to peruse these documents and what have you. But it could be that, but the methodology regarding that study to myself doesn't seem particularly clear, and then coming out from that, we've got to be assured that everything from that is the findings are appropriate and valid. So can we have further details of the study itself and possibly the 40 stakeholders who were consulted in the first place, and to get a better grasp of what where we were and where we're going. Does that make sense, Richard?
No, it makes sense to me, Glenn. I'm afraid I'm going to completely duck it though by pushing that to Paul, because I'm sure Paul not that I'm not going to claim to have any hand on the steering wheel on this report, other than pushing the MCA to say we need something. But I know that Paul, Ruth, and also Sean from my team have stacks of further paperwork that they've not thrown your way. I'm sure they'll be happy to.
Yeah, Richard, I was going to just invite Paul.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Hopefully it works now. Yes, so to answer your question there was 40 key stakeholders that were interviewed as a big part of this. A lot of that was some important businesses across the region, but that was across the public sector as well. And I think one of the consultants, when they reported back to us on that a lot of these meetings, that there was so much enthusiasm, that a lot of these meetings went on for a long time. So there was lots of interest, and it was really ripe in terms of what they got back, and it really helped the report. And I can tell you, in terms of it's quite a long report that we got anyway, but the first draft was even longer than that, because there was no shortage of information on that. But the other side of it, in terms of the methodology, so there's the interviews, which was a range of all which we thought were the important stakeholders across the region, but there's also a lot of desk-based analysis. There's a lot in terms of the data sources out there. In terms, some were publicly available, some were bought specifically for this, to really get a grasp of our businesses. And one of the key things as well within this was actually identifying some of the subsectors of where the businesses, where we've got strengths within that, and a lot of that desk-based research that I said was a bit of a gap that we hadn't had before, helped us identify that. So if you would like it, after this meeting, there's a note on the methodology, but we didn't share it because Richard was trying to do the headlines and the key findings, but there's a lot of information behind it that we can share later to reassure you.
Okay, thank you. Peter.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, first of all, thank the officers and Richard for the work that's been done here. I was also pleased to see that the consultants that we used were able to be consultants based in South Yorkshire, which is great, because we have been pushing the procurement and agenda. So that was fantastic. I also just want to understand a bit more about the businesses and the nature of the businesses, because I noticed in the slide we've got 1,815 businesses, and I'm not really clear from that exactly what these businesses are. And therefore, when I'm thinking about businesses, I'm thinking on my area of transport that we maybe have 200 rail businesses. That's a huge number of businesses, and therefore I really want to dig down to actually have a better understanding of what we actually do have. It's a little bit general, as has been said before.
That's completely fair, I think, for this, Peter. And there's actually a technical annex behind the report as well, and I'll happily share that with you afterwards. But really, I think, as Richard outlined earlier, health and wellbeing is such a broad sector. It does include so much, but actually in the detail of the report, and there's a bit, Richard did touch on it, but there are a number of subsectors within that we identify where we have got businesses in there, and I'll share with you afterwards. But if you are interested, Peter, there's a very, very long technical annex with lots of data, a number of businesses, which could help you if you're struggling to get to sleep at night.
Okay, thank you. I mean, just a couple of things. Oh, sorry. Yes, please do.
Thanks, Chair. Just one question. Looking at the report, and particularly the section in terms of national challenges impacting on health and wellbeing assets, and there's reference at the start of that section to funding for proof of concept activities, pilots, development and testing new innovations, etc. Now, I think we all recognise we're about to enter an area of uncertainty from a national perspective in terms of government and funding, finance, etc. And I was just wondering if underneath this there'd been any work done in terms of various, if I can describe it as funding vehicles, in order to address some of these challenges, because it seems to me that if we've got this innovation, this latent talent, this latent genius that's sitting there, for that not to then be able to develop and to grow for the sake of, as is referenced in here, £10,000 and £20,000 ago in some circumstances. Has there been some thought given and some work done in terms of unlocking that potential?
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor. Yeah, I think the one you mentioned in terms of which I thought was one of the more interesting recommendations from the report was the seed funding, and this links to the next agenda item as well with the Innovation Board about really how we want to do investment differently, and it's probably admitting how we've not done maybe things as well in the past to enable some of our entrepreneurs in health and wellbeing and other sectors to not prosper. So I think that's the one in terms of doing funding, different models or vehicles and doing it differently of how we can better use our resources to help people start businesses, to scale up the businesses. So actually I thought that one recommendation report was really helpful, and I think it ties into the MTA's agenda, the Mayor's agenda, and what we're trying to do with the Innovation Board. So yeah, in terms of how we help our entrepreneurs prosper using things like seed funding, I think that's a really interesting way for the MTA and the LEP to go.
If I may just ask another question on that. So obviously that's public funding. What work or research has been done in terms of private funding, investors, etc., etc.?
Again, really, I think this ties into the next agenda item about how we better work with the private sector to draw in funding and match funding, and just that whole plans for innovation, primarily through the Innovation Board that Linda will come on to, about how we better work with investors outside the region as well. And I think there's bits of this where this report's identified we need to be looking more external as well. Sometimes maybe we've been a little bit insular about how we look for funding and people that are interested in, like the report shows, we've got so many assets and strengths. This is a really big opportunity, so I think how we engage with the private sector going forward is really important to that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Richard, is that you again?
Yeah, that's me, Lucy.
Yeah.
Just hopefully wanting just to finish off. Thank you. I think I've got 3 reflections just from the conversation. So on the last point first, Paul's absolutely right. We can't take health and life sciences in isolation. This has to come under the work of the Innovation Board, because there's a whole innovation culture and ecosystem to build, which will help to lift all our sectors, of which health and life sciences will be one of the beneficiaries. When it does come to VC funding, etc., we're an unknown quantity, particularly in London. When I have brought investors to the region, and particularly when I've taken them to Olympic Legacy Park and showed them what we've got, what we're building, they are licking their lips and wanting to know how they can start to get a piece of it. And we just don't have that familiarity with how to deal with those conversations en masse, and hopefully the Innovation Board will help us to lift that. I think the other point I'd make is around the bit that the report won't say and can't say, and it wasn't part of the scope, is what's happening elsewhere. Now, I have many career-limiting Sheffield-based conversations where I say, let's have a look at what Leeds are doing. But this is just another one of a series. But when I put my Leeds hat on, and it is sometimes quite painful to wear it, because of the narrative that Leeds created 5 years ago with the Science and Innovation Audit, because of the fact that people in Leeds understand not that they are looking to build their life science sector, but they know the specific aspects of what they're looking to build. So for Leeds, it's digital health and it's medical technologies. They know their value propositions, they can give those value propositions back to government, they become known for it. It means that what's happening now is that colleagues such as the Perm Sec at the Department of Health are coming to Leeds and the Leeds leadership to ask what they can do to help Leeds go further faster. What investment can they put in? DIT likewise came to me only last week to talk about how can we make Leeds and the wider region part of our places for growth agenda and push it out to post overseas as a proposition in its own right. Come to Leeds, invest in Leeds. So my final point is, this is the start of a conversation for us. I am more than happy if anybody wants to go deeper into what health and life sciences really means, to put on a session and invite people in. Sean, my colleague from the HSN, is probably the one rolling his eyes as I speak because he knows that's work coming to him. But I do think we need to upskill ourselves when it comes to this knowledge. And as I said right at the beginning, move away from just perceiving this as an NHS endeavour, because actually a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about with innovation will never touch the NHS. An awful lot of the work that we need to do if we're going to be world leading is about how do you empower citizens to take control of their health and avoid going to the NHS in the first place. So this is not simply an NHS play, but I'm very happy to go deeper with anybody who wants to hear it, to hear about what the opportunities for the sector could look like.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And I think, I mean, my sense is that we need to ensure that we're bringing this discussion back through the LEP board. We can't see this as a one-off standalone item, obviously linked through Linda to the work that you're going to be doing. But I think sometimes we have some great pieces and we discuss them, and then there's quite a lot of time between discussing them again. So thinking about the individual elements of this in terms of recommendations and linking them to the wider business that we do, but bringing that discussion back here. And the other thing I would say is that I'm always mindful when we've done stakeholder engagement about the feedback loop and what's then shared with those people that we speak to. And I'd be quite interested to find out what you think about that, and whether there's a mechanism for doing that to keep those businesses engaged in the conversation that we're having as well. So.
Yeah, I agree, Lucy. So far, I've already presented this report to a subsection of groups through the AMID board. The businesses from that, some of them that engaged in the report. We've got a public webinar on Monday on the report as well. But yeah, in terms of the specific ones that engaged, I think it would be a good idea to follow up with them, because, like I said, there was so much passion and interest in this area. It'd be good to capture some of that, and we will.
Okay, great. Can't see any other hands on that. So we'll move on, please, to item number 5. And Paul, I think you're going to do a brief introduction, and then Linda, over to you.
Yeah, this is just me handing over the baton again. So Linda's been working with us with developing the innovation board. She's been really helpful, challenging, but in a constructive way, and we welcome that. And we're just really grateful for her time and input so far. And yeah, Linda's going to talk you through progress so far in developing the innovation board, its vision, and the next steps. So there's the baton.
That was a slick baton. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me today. I think I just thought it would be really helpful for me to sort of share some of what we've been doing. So we've been working together probably for about sort of 6 to 8 weeks. Reaffirm sort of the why it's important for an innovation board, and and I've been with the team through sort of the prospectus around what the innovation board is designed to do, what it's hoping to achieve, and then sort of talk a little bit towards the end about how I would really like the board to work with the rest of the LEP and some of the other things that we've just heard that are sort of going on elsewhere. I am going to say right up front that I am still sort of amassing a view of what is going on everywhere else. That's been really difficult to do in 6 weeks, and I think the depth is really important as well to that earlier debate. I mean, one of my reflections is where we've got real strength and depth and passion and enthusiasm. We need to make sure that we sort of capture that and actually bring it into what we're doing. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO of Harworth, and I've been there for about 18 months. I am a South Yorkshire girl born and bred and raised here, but I've had a long career in property, regeneration and finance, so I bring sort of some of those business sort of skills into chairing the innovation board. And I suppose actually for the LEP board, this has been quite a long time coming. I understand this was first discussed at least 2 years ago, and we're now at the point where we're starting to sort of bring the innovation board to life. A reminder a little bit as to why you recommended that the region had an innovation board. It was instigated very much by this LEP board to meet a need that was identified where there was no strategic leadership of innovation across South Yorkshire. And I think that we've heard one example of where it's happening already in pockets all over the place, but have we got the mechanisms to actually sort of catalyse and support that growth? And I'm sure every sector we touch on will tell you a similar story. And so the LEP board recommended that the innovation board was set up to provide a specific focus on this and to work with other bodies and groups and organisations across South Yorkshire to actually develop solutions that enabled us to shift the paradigm, sort of on the region's productivity, and leverage the region's capabilities. And I think, sort of I'm going to jump to funding, because I think funding is really important in this. So we've talked a little bit about actually making sure we've got the story to tell. What's the prospectus for South Yorkshire? It's really important that you have that in order to be able to attract funders, occupiers, businesses to come and invest. And funding is probably the single biggest thing that we don't actually have an answer for yet. And it's not just South Yorkshire; it's everywhere, and it's all sorts of things that happen in across regions. So it won't surprise you when when I tell you that one of the key working groups that we have is financing and funding, and actually working on how we draw on not just structures that the government have put in place, like the infrastructure bank and other things, but actually how we bring that private sector sort of funding from banks and from institutional investors into play. And I think the point was really well made, actually, that we're going to need to probably create product here. We're going to have to actually work with those organisations to create product, which means actually our story has to be really investable. So that's going to be a big piece of work that I think, whether it's across the LET board, the innovation board, or other bodies that are working, that we're going to have to join up and do. LET board, the innovation board is very much private sector led, but it's actually working through collaborating with public bodies, with research councils, with funders and others. So this is not something that actually the private sector can do on their own, and it's not something that they should do on their own. But I think actually they've got a really big role to play as investors and in some of the businesses that are going to create the wealth for our region going forward, but actually helping the region to create the narrative to drive this forward. And I think the other point here is it's a long-term project. So when I sort of thought about this in some of the earlier conversations, I mean, what I can tell you, a business like Harworth that regenerates, some of these projects that we work in, they're taking sort of 20 to 30 years. Actually, the innovation board and what we're trying to do here in terms of building, sort of ecosystems that support innovation, that grow, sort of from small to big, or from big, medium-sized to bigger, and big to bigger, and attract the sort of investment that, will really sort of change the economic landscape of our region, is not something we're going to fix in a political term. It's something that actually we have to put plans and infrastructures in place that are going to enable it to sort of to work in perpetuity. From a board member perspective, it's envisaged that the board is relatively tight. So the original plans were around 9 board members, sort of being sort of the sort of number we were aiming for. Drawing from the innovation ecosystem stakeholder model, which probably many of you will be familiar with, and bringing in a mix of entrepreneurs, of risk capital, so the funding side of it, corporate, both large and small, so SMEs basically very much alive and thriving in South Yorkshire need to be part of this debate. It's not just about big corporates, government, and then the universities and sort of science, sort of the science that's coming out of those universities, but also a focus, I think, as well through that lens on sort of skills. What are the skills that we're going to need as a region to really sort of maximise our potential? And this is supported by external experts. And I sort of echo the point made at the end by the previous presenter. We need to look out as well as in. We need to look at where best practice is happening and whether or not it's applicable to us. But we also need that external validation of what we put forward. Is it working? Are we delivering what we've actually set out to deliver when we put that roadmap in place? And is it actually delivering the underlying benefits that we expected it to do? So it's really important that we've got that external input, but also that external check. The innovation board, and I think I always felt I didn't need to say this, but I'm going to, by definition, has to be highly collaborative. That's how innovation happens. And actually, if you've not got a mix of people on that board that is highly collaborative, both with each other, but actually everybody else who we have to interface with, which includes this board, actually it's not an innovation board. You need to call it something else. So from my perspective, making sure that we have a group of, experts in their field as individuals on that board, but who are highly collaborative in the way they work with each other and others, is massively important to make sure that we can focus on, prioritise, focus on the areas that we've prioritised on, but also begin to accelerate, and create and accelerate ecosystems around the region. From a subgroup perspective, so because you can't do this sort of just with 9 people, the way that we're planning to sort of bring this to life is to have each of 5 subgroups, key subgroups we've identified today. And over time that may change. We may bring more in, we may combine them. But 5 initially each will be led by a member of the Innovation Board. And I hope actually sort of, again, that the LEP will work with us on this, where members of the LEP have got specific skills as well, and have been involved in sort of working groups, or are today involved in groups that need to input to what the Innovation Board is doing. I don't want to duplicate it. Whatever's going on elsewhere, we've got to leverage it. But the 5 subgroups are finance and funding, which I've touched on. There's one around infrastructure, which is as broad as, ends up in housing at the end, because at the end of the day, you've also got, if you're creating jobs, you need somewhere for people to live who are working in those industries. Business and ecosystems, skills, and then we've talked a little bit earlier about this narrative development piece. So we've got 5 core working groups which will start to populate as we populate the members of the Innovation Board. From a governance perspective, I'm really clear that the Innovation Board is established under the governance of both this LEP board and and SIMCA, and reports into those governance arrangements. And I know, whilst they may sort of modify as we go through the sort of next few months, sort of the Innovation Board is there, and it's focused to develop solutions and to problems across each of the innovation areas, to bring proposals forward. But actually, it's very much working into this governance structure that I'm talking to today, I suppose, actually. And then in terms of where are we up to, so having sort of revisited the terms of reference for the board, the proposals for number of board members, how we think it's going to operate, we're now at the point where we've spent some time actually looking at who potential candidates for membership of that board would be from across each of those sort of core areas. We'd very much like a LEP board representative on the Innovation Board. I think it's really important that we have an umbilical cord back into this structure in the LEP. We're working on organising both secretariat and officer support. I've been fantastically supported so far by Felix and Joseph, but I'm conscious there's only 2 of them and they do many other things for many other people. And basically we're just continuing to map the landscape and to come up with a set of priorities that we will put to this board to say, look, this is where we'd like to focus initially. But my priority at the moment is actually on getting the board constituted, the working groups actually set up, not just being led by the board members, but those wider sort of constituents. And I'd just really like your input and support to who you think should be on some of these working groups, who has got real great expertise in what we're trying to do. And I'm really happy to talk to any of you offline, or go and talk to people that you think I should be talking to help me to constitute these working groups effectively. And I think, Lucy, that's probably all I was going to say.
Lovely, thank you very much, Linda. It's really helpful. So if I can just open up the opportunity for comments or questions to Linda. Dave.
Thank you very much indeed. This is enormously welcome, and it's something I support very much indeed. Innovation is a vast topic, and of course it sits at the heart of the SEP. And so one of the things that I've been trying to work out in my own mind is, on a practical basis, what's the Innovation Board actually going to do, and what's the sort of scale of the projects it's going to do, and which can be anything from supporting individual companies. I mean, much as we heard in the previous presentation, right the way through to a kind of grand strategy that includes building of science parks and and everything in between. And I realised until the board is up and running, it's kind of difficult to kind of exactly put your finger on that. But I was wondering whether you could give some idea of what you think that success will look like in 5 or 10 years' time if the Innovation Board has really worked well.
I will do that. No, and thank you. It's because it's a great question, and I've spent quite a lot of time pondering that myself, because I think the scope is enormous. In innovation, I mean, the scope is enormous, and I think the first thing that, and this is why I need to spend some time with the team, basically developing a real understanding of the scope of what is already going on in the region, and I think that's really important. And I think we need to look at what are the inhibitors or blockers, as a board, to actually things happening, things growing. And I think I come back to, sort of there are two things in my mind that we've touched on that are really important. One is, how do you tell your story? And the other one is actually, sort of how do you fund it? What are the enablers and the mechanisms? And I think in the early days, the prioritisation of, sort of what are the blockers? What are the areas that we should be focusing on? How do we make ecosystems thrive? Because this covers, again, innovation covers things that get started in people's bedrooms that grow, right through to the big science that's already happening in places like the Advanced Manufacturing Park and some of the major businesses in the region. So actually understanding the scope and then drilling down on, I think in particular, sort of the what ifs, what's stopping that from happening, and what if we did this, what would it do? Identifying some of those things, I think, is going to be a really important part of the board. The board's about solutions and enablers and helping the region to put maybe frameworks in place that don't already exist, or to develop structures like funding, we've touched on funding, that don't already exist to actually catalyse it. But I think there's a massive amount to do, and some of this will be being done already. You will have groups of entrepreneurs that are already receiving, whether it's startup places, for their businesses, that are either free of charge or sort of reduced costs, so support from sort of all initiatives that are in place already, through to mentoring and support and growth. And I think we shouldn't be replicating that if it's working. We should be looking for what are the blockers and actually sort of where can we create new solutions. So it's a really hard question until we get it up and running, but my head is on, there's so much going on, and I've not found anybody who's not passionate or enthusiastic about it when you talk to them. But actually, we'd really miss a trick if we're not focused on making things happen when, there's a really sort of good, solid ecosystem there already that actually just needs enabling. Richard.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks for that. Really interesting to hear the development. I think my point is on the makeup of the board, and I guess it touches on something that both you and I have said today, which is we need to be less insular as a region. So there's something for me about both in the board and potentially more importantly in the sub-boards. How do we attract our alumni that's not well mapped at the moment, but we have great people doing great things who don't live here anymore, but I'm sure have a link back to us and want to bring their expertise back in a structured way. And also those people who are in the region but have roles that perhaps give them sight and engagement with things that are happening outside the region. I just don't think we have enough of an import mechanism for good ideas and places where things are working well. And this board and its subgroup is a good idea. It's a good way of bringing in some fresh thinking.
Yes, Linda, come back.
I mean, it again is a really great point. There is a piece of stakeholder mapping work that I think we need to do, that again we will need input from a very sort of broad church of people, that identify not just the people who are critically working in the region today that we need to be connecting with, but also those from outside of the region. Some of those we know, so the likes of Andy Haldane, who spoke at the Economic Summit, and many others really have a vested interest in actually helping us as a region. But actually there will be many, many more. I mean, you look at people like me, I've met so many people in the since the end of lockdown that actually moved back into the region from elsewhere in the country or the world, because basically, and they're conducting their business from here. I moved out of South Yorkshire as a teenager because there were no jobs. Actually, me and many of my peers have been back, in the region now for many years, running businesses, being part of institutions in the region. So I think, again, we've got a really great story to tell, but we are going to have a stakeholder strategy, and we're going to have a communication strategy around this as well. And I do keep coming back to, that's why we've got to get the narrative of what we're doing and, sort of the brilliance that's locked up in this region. We've got to be able to articulate that. And I think it's got to be really simple, actually.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, Oliver.
Thank you. I know we've spoken about some of this already, excuse me, and we'll continue to do so, but I thought it was worth just sort of saying out loud, really, the piece of this that feels fundamentally important to me is particularly how we support our small to medium-sized businesses, and particularly around process innovation as it relates to productivity. And that feels like the big gap in this conversation so far, at least. And I know that it's not missed by you, Linda, but I just think that for me personally, that's where so much of this should be focused, because that's how we generate a bigger, better, and most importantly, more productive economy in South Yorkshire. So all the work that the Innovation Board does should, in my view, filter through that question about how we do that, because that's the core thing the LEP and frankly, the Mayor needs to focus on as well. And then on your point again, back to that narrative piece, and there will be a bigger piece of work going on, I hope, around that narrative piece. So we need to work together closely on how we make those two things align, and talk very much in terms of the innovation that's going on in the region and how that's one of our unique selling points going forward.
Great, thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Just following up that point, I was also going to mention small and medium-sized enterprises, which is my professional background in South Yorkshire over my professional career. And I was pleased that in your presentation, Linda, you did reference SMEs, but then when you came to the subgroups, there wasn't a subgroup really honing on exactly what the SME sector want and need. And it's almost cross-cutting, isn't it?
Yeah.
The five subgroups are relevant to SMEs, but perhaps what they need is a little bit different to what the top of the pyramid, the top 10% need. There's this big block of SMEs, and I'm wondering if we could, through the professional institutes in South Yorkshire, get into the ribs of professional advisors to those SMEs, the people that do the research and development tax claims, and the people that try to raise finance for those smaller businesses, and really try and home in on what's wrong and what we could do better.
I think that's another great point. And I think, I am really, that's why at the beginning when I talked about what are the blockers, it doesn't matter, like I say, if you're a startup in your bedroom or you're an SME, they will all have blockers and they will be different, but the SMEs will dominate the landscape, sort of any region in terms of their contribution to the economy. So it's really important. And I think as even as you were saying that, whether or not we can set up some sort of cross group that actually focuses, because you'll need SMEs on each of the working groups, because otherwise we will never get their perspective, but whether or not we can put something else in alongside that focuses on specific issues that come up for SMEs alongside that, we need to look at that. It's a really good point, thank you.
Great stuff, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I can see another online. I can't see very well, apologies.
Oh.
Glasses are failing.
No problem, Chair. No problem. My question is going to be around the comm strategy and reporting mechanisms. We've said that membership is kept quite small and tight, and I understand that. But logistically, with no representation from local authorities on the board, we must ensure that through the SIMCA executive that local authorities receive timely reports, because there's a danger that we could get missed out on this, and that might mean taking some of those reports, those theme board reports, out of sequence. So I just thought I'd make that point to ensure that the Secretariat in some way is aware.
Thank you. Do you want to comment?
Only to say, Glyn, I agree with you. I think that's entirely right, and we will absolutely work to make sure that you're involved as much really as you want to be, actually, and make sure that you're involved in that process. So we'll have that conversation, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Well, Linda, thank you. It's really good to have you here and hear all about where you've got to, and obviously we'll look forward to picking up the conversation beyond today and probably welcoming you back here at some point as well. So thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 6, which I think Andy Gates is going to present. Thanks, Paul. Destination management.
Morning, everyone. Work on the basis it does stop doing that when you talk. It does. Excellent. This paper probably has 4 drivers, I think. The first is the demise of Welcome to Yorkshire, which I won't go into, but it is no more, or it's certainly no more in the shape it was. Second driver is the national review of destination management marketing organisations led by Nick Dubois. Last time I checked, Nadine Dorries was still Secretary of State for DCMS. We've got a new Levelling Up Secretary, which is exciting, Greg Clark. It's actually very sensible. So we may hear more from the National DMO review quite soon. The third driver is there was an emerging case for us to do something different and get our act together on our interactions with whatever a regional destination marketing management organisation does and is and for and reflects South Yorkshire priorities. And our business community and the engagement we've had with our business community were telling us that they don't feel like they are being represented in a sort of destination management marketing world. And then the fourth driver is probably the Mayor putting a bit of a rocket up all this in terms of narrative, story, and visitor economy is one of the strands of a narrative. It's not the only strand, but it is definitely one of the strands that our innovation story plays into our story about our place and how we promote it. So they're the four drivers for this work, really. What the report isn't able to do in 4 pages is tell the long and checkered history of what we've done in the past, what our individual council areas do on destination management and destination marketing. Doesn't even tell a bit of the story about what the MCA has invested in and done over the last 3 or 4 years. But what the recommendations try to get us to a point is really to acknowledge that if we don't get our act together as a region, sub-regionally now, then things will happen to us. The national review of DMOs will make recommendations that impact on us. The wider Yorkshire leaders' work being led by a group which we're engaged within will happen to us. If we're not clear about what we want, how we should play into that, how we might fund it, how we might organise ourselves locally, that will happen to us. So they're the drivers. The paper sort of sets out that if we're honest with ourselves, we don't really have a strong enough collective evidence base about the type of things we should be promoting, the type of things our visitor economy attractions and businesses and sector needs to thrive. Destination management is not just about marketing, it is about the skills needs of the visitor economy industry, it is about the infrastructure needs of the visitor economy, and the LEP and the MCA have invested in our infrastructure around the visitor economy. But it's been roads and stuff to unlock Gulliver's in Rotherham, investment in the Yorkshire Wildlife Park, but again, investment in the roundabout that got people in. So we've dipped our toe into investment in that world, but we haven't had a strategic plan as to how we unlock the growth. And we'll see whether colleagues agree in the discussion, but none of the officer-led conversations that I have had with colleagues comes back and tells me that we've got our story right. There's some really good local initiatives, really good local relationships with organisations like Welcome to Yorkshire, but they've been very local. They've not been strategically joined up at the South Yorkshire level, and we've underinvested in it. So that's the drive, that's the context for the paper. The recommendations really are about us unpicking all that and understanding what it is and coming back to the LEP and the Mayoral Combined Authority with some recommendations about how we do it. So quite simply, it's proposing that we do a detailed analysis of the visitor economy, opportunities for growth of the short, medium, long term, undertaking some research into what actually works, what have other places done that we can learn from in terms of actual activity you can do to support the visitor economy, the governance structures you might have around it, where the activity is best led. Is it led best at the local authority level? Is there a role for the SYMCA? Or should it all be done at the Yorkshire level? And that we develop some proposals for us to kick about to take this forward. We'd really like, and the paper makes this clear, I think the LEP private sector board members should be heavily engaged in that and help us shape it. And then one of the recommendations is that we whilst we're working out some of the evidence and the governance, that we also we don't need to wait to start understanding what our story is on the visitor economy and telling that narrative. And I think that plays into the innovation board, the work that Oliver wants to do. So that's in essence it. So I'll take comments if that's all right.
Thank you, Andy. I'm really pleased to see the emphasis of private sector involvement in the recommendations, and we have got specific skills normally around the table, not here today, but there will be a wide interest, I'm sure, from colleagues, so look forward to having another conversation. But can I open up for questions, please, and comments? Anybody? Please, yeah.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Mine's quite a simple, practical question. Obviously, the link with the Dubois review is of fundamental importance here, and I just wondered if we had any indication in terms of when that was going to report.
The classic imminently. That was imminently before we had not a change in government, but we don't know. Senior officials are coming up to Yorkshire in later this month with a view to telling us what they think is going to be in it. So they're coming to speak to the Yorkshire group. I think they're doing that because they're pretty confident that they've nailed it down and got ministerial agreement what it's like to be, and so we'll start to understand it. We already know that Visit Britain and Visit England, who kind of received their funding from the DCMS, are already sort of starting to tell us that sub-regionally it's quite important you get your act together, because that's how we're going to want to work with you. So there's elements of that Dubois review are starting to automatically filter through to how the agencies that are funded by DCMS operate. So it's coming.
Any other comments or questions? Can't see any. Oh, Oliver, yeah.
Thanks, Andy. I just thought it was worth kind of saying I worked at the in 2012 until 2016, and at that point we had I can't remember what it's called. We talked about this yesterday. Visitor economy, visitor attraction, something board group, and it feels like we've gone backwards a bit, really, because in that group we talked about a number of sort of big ideas, not least, remember there being a very live conversation about a hotel levy at the time, and things like that, and driving a strategy for the visitor economy, and that's gone now. Hopefully we'll be coming back, but I think it's a really important part of what we should be absolutely exploring. At the risk of being a one-person visitor attraction economy board myself, I was at Wentworth Woodhouse the other day, and it was incredible. It's incredible. I've never been before, which is a bit embarrassing, but it was incredible and should be a jewel in the crown of our visitor economy. Needs a load of investment, needs a load of support. It'll take some time, but unless and until we have a strategy about what are those parts of our visitor economy that are going to bring people in to the region, we're not going to get there. And I think that would help them immensely to be part of that strategy. And no doubt there are a bunch of other visitor attractions and assets that we have that would benefit likewise. So I think it's a really important part of what we want to do. I was part of the conversation at Yorkshire Leaders Board, albeit remotely, into what happens next with Welcome to Yorkshire and the assets, and the group / bloke who had bought those assets and the rights to the brand, etc., came and presented. And I think it's fair to say that the feeling in the room was that wasn't particularly the direction of travel that we wanted to go down. So I think that's a very live conversation and something we might need to come back to relatively swiftly. At the risk of putting the cat amongst the pigeons, I think the MCA, both here and potentially in West Yorkshire, could and should kind of explore conversations about what our role is in that a bit more proactively. So I'm pleased to see the paper, and this should be something that we move on relatively swiftly.
Great, thank you, Oliver. Okay, any other comments or questions at this point for Andy? No? Great, thank you. So we'll move on to item 8, which is the launch of the Data and Intelligence Hub. I think we've got John Guest again presenting. Oh no, yeah.
Hi everyone. Just bear with me whilst I put some things on screen. Just move off that. So the Data and Intelligence Hub. So LEP board members have periodically been updated with progress on this. probably most notably the cost of living session at the last LEP board. Just to summarise, the Data and Intelligence Hub has been a development of a central hub for data dashboards to show a range of different data sets on local authority areas and also South Yorkshire and comparisons to the national average. It's around data indicators, and the strapline really is to enable better access to data. Just to summarise some of the drivers, really, data is important to a range of different stakeholders, including the government, and in its Levelling Up white paper identified that underpinning all of the Levelling Up white paper will be improved data and transparency, oversight and analytics, evaluation and experimentation. Within the Strategic Economic Plan, we highlight that we would like to build our intelligence and data to support intelligent decision making at every level. And within the Mayor's Manifesto, there are commitments around transparency, accountability, equality and accessibility, and that can be done in a range of different ways, but data is also one of those. So the dashboards and the Data and Intelligence Hub helps to understand South Yorkshire's economy, its society and environment. The idea is that the data on there can support users in a range of different ways. We tried to map this out and started to run out of paper, but it can support research, can inform business cases, inform inward investors, can inform competitions, bids to government, and there are 130 data sets across 14 dashboards. Those 14 dashboards align with Levelling Up white paper themes and priorities for the combined authority. The data within this, so the 130 data sets, they were selected on four criteria. Is that data set updated? Is it available at local authority level or below? Is it credible? And is it interesting as well? Although I take it that can also be subjective. The Data and Intelligence Hub is a step towards open data, more transparency and access to data within South Yorkshire. And it's not static, it's live. We'd like to add to it, we'd like to improve upon it. And our next stage really within our sites is mapping local community data or hyper-local data, to utilise a phrase, and also to explore data analysis, and that's something that we're working with the University of Sheffield on a proposition around the Office for Data Analytics, which is around sharing data, further deep insight. It's not just data, dashboards and insight. And what I can do, I can walk you through on screen, although I appreciate that may be a challenge. So what I'm going to try and do is show a video to summarise it very quickly, and please let me know if the music is annoying, because I can turn that off. Hopefully that wasn't, the music wasn't too painful, but the video was interesting. The ambition is to launch this on the 11th of July through a soft launch, launching it to different stakeholders who may be using it in different ways. For example, it is anticipated that we launch it and work with our universities to highlight it perhaps in September, more so than at the moment, and for different groups to be engaged. And we're also working with the Mayor's team to align it with some of the priorities there. Really welcome thoughts on the concept, how it may support you and some of your activities, but also the launch and how we can get it in front of the right people. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm interested in which officer did the music and played.
Yes,
You can tell us later on that one. Perhaps we need more music at the let board, full stop, that's what we need. Okay, can I ask if colleagues have got any questions or comments about that presentation?
Yeah, just I suppose a simple, straightforward question. Is there a test site that people can go and have a look at in the meanwhile? Is it sort of a dummy site that we can sample?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, so at the moment it's on a test site. So on the 11th, it will go onto our main website. We've gone through a period of testing, which I'd say a fairly sort of lengthy process, because there's been a lot of forward and backwards. So, for example, people providing feedback on the design, but also sometimes the data, and the design is an easier fix. The data sometimes requires a bit more going back to the original source. At the moment, all of the data is manually updated. However, going forward, around 40% of it will be updated automatically, and that's just contingent on a few technology challenges at the moment, but that it's available on a test site at the moment.
So just to follow on, is it possible to have a look at that, or shall we have to wait till the soft launch in order to see it?
Yeah, I can share it straight away. Officers, we've at all local authorities, academics, and the general public have been engaged in sort of the testing. But yes, certainly happy to send through the link. I think it's within the board paper, but I appreciate many of you have got printed copies. So just requires a bit of a copy and paste.
Can I just check, is the paper asking this group to accept the preferred option, or are you asking us to talk about those options as well?
It's primarily really about the next steps and how this is taken forward, because we feel like we're at a point in the journey where we need a bit of direction, really.
So, okay, so are you going to seek engagement with private sector board members sort of proactively outside of this process then, so we can help to work with you on that? Is that?
I think so. I think that's sort of one of our areas, is that we believe that public sector colleagues are fairly well engaged in this, and that really the private sector also has a role, and we'd like to support activities within the private sector as well around this.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions? I can't see anything on the screen. Peter, sorry, yeah.
Thanks. I don't quite know how to phrase this, but I think it's more to do with the use to which we'll put it. It talks about partners using it. I'm interested in how we can use it to better market ourselves. So by posing questions such as, want to invest in South Yorkshire, you might find it helpful to go to these parts of the database. Because I know Transport for the North are very keen, and they think their database of open data is very, very valuable to the North in effectively getting the message across. And so is this. It's just what we're going to be able to do using it.
Thanks, Peter. The possibilities are perhaps endless, really, and with that, I think is a challenge in marketing this to the right people and ensuring that those messages are taken forward. I've been working with the communications and marketing team to try and get some of those messages. For example, pulling out key data around our population and perhaps making comparisons, globally and as to sort of how important that is to try and bring traffic through, get people to use it, because what we believe that this has sort of a differentiation and its USP is that we believe that many people should be able to use this, whereas there are many different open data platforms where people are sort of bamboozled and don't know where to start. And this for me is a really good step on that journey.
Thank you. Under my notes on this item on the agenda, it just says be supportive. That's what it says. So I will be supportive. But I just also wanted to say, I think it's a great step and a really good idea. And I would like to see it as a floor, not a ceiling. I think the more that we can do in this space, the better. I think open data should be the way that we are headed. And just on Peter's point, I think in terms of then working with partners to allow them to use that as a resource to create tools, or even businesses in some instances off the back of that data, I think is a really positive step. And so we should be pushing further and faster on the whole idea, frankly.
Thank you. Okay, I think.
Excuse me,
Angela,
Lucy.
Sorry, I can see you. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Just a really brief comment. The Skills Area Network, which was part of the commissioning body for this piece of work, they'll be absolutely delighted to see this. The link does work. The link that's in the paper absolutely works because I've got that open. I think this is a really good start point. I agree with the floor, not ceiling point. I think what this will facilitate is much more targeted activity in some of the subgroups and in some of the thematic boards, which means we'll get sharper at solving some of the problems that we talk about a lot, but aren't solving quickly enough, in my opinion. So I think this is great. I think it's going to underpin some much more swift, agile work. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.
If it's all right to just come back on that, yeah, we've already started to have conversations about the next steps. So I alluded to mapping, but also thematically how, for example, this may support the Education Skills and Employability Board. So having, for example, a careers set, so looking at job posting data, understanding what's going on in the economy. We are slightly hamstrung by available data, so data that sort of meets tests is available at a local geography, but yeah, we're wholly collaborative and really want to support people as best we can with data.
Great, thank you very much. Good discussion. So I think I can't see any more hands. I think that's concluding that one. So we'll move to item 9, which is Andy Gates, and it's the annual report delivery plan. Thanks, Andy.
Hello again. Every year this report comes round, and every year I think next year I'm not going to change the exec summary that says the reason we do this annual report is because we're told to by the government. Of course, that is one of the reasons we do it, but it's not the only reason. We should do it because you should do it. And it is important to reflect on what we've done and what we're going to do. I think what I hope the report that this paper prefaces does is demonstrate that our activity has shifted from being about spending local growth fund and reporting back what our local growth fund project was and the programmes we spent our money on and whether we delivered on time and on budget and how many houses and jobs and growth they created, to what the LEP board also does outside of this meeting and outside of a capital programme, which the LEP is not directly responsible for anymore, but goes into advocacy, goes into engagement. And I look around the digital room and the physical room and think everyone here plays a part, does stuff outside of board meetings that is really valuable and is making a difference. Capturing it is always really important. But that's what we've tried to do in the report. I hope it captures a good summary of the work that individual board members do through the role that private sector board members play on thematic boards. Even though that's technically MCA activity, it is work that the private sector LEP board influence through every single thematic board meeting. And that programme of work, whether it's capital funding, whether it's housing delivery, whether it's Get Britain Building Fund, whether it's the adult education budget work, whether it's informing and designing the Economic Summit, whether it's designing and forming the South Yorkshire Innovation Board, all of that has come through this LEP board. Bill had to lead, but Bill's work with the union hat on in terms of helping us design our progressive procurement work was fundamental. And that went through to the MCA and was signed off and approved and is now in the contracts and the work we're doing when we're spending money. So there is that golden thread through from work discussed here as a board and individual contributions to what we actually end up doing. And I'll say no more than that, but I hope the report and the sort of publication that sits beneath it reflects some of that.
Thanks, Andy. It is welcome, and the breadth of the showing the role of the LEP is welcome as well. So any comments or questions from colleagues in the room? Or Richard, I can see you.
Yeah, I don't know if the door's closed, Andy, on content, but I was struck we didn't mention anything about our international work, and I think particularly the engagement we've had with the High Commissioner for India over the period, I thought might deserve a few lines.
Couldn't agree more. It's not closed. We'll get that in.
Peter, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Leading on from Richard's point, I just wonder if we could nudge you a little bit further into the work we do on external engagement generally. It does mention it in the report, and I think that India point is really important. I think it is the regional work we do with bodies across the north, and that can include not only transport but health as well, and also climate change. I think we do things with APPGs, with Parliament, and we have sessions with ministers when requested on particular topics of interest to that minister. So I think I could just nudge you to just maybe beef that up a little bit. Thanks.
It's a prod rather than nudge. You're right. No, I'll capture that, Peter. Not a problem.
When is the final version available then, Andy?
I look over my shoulder at the government colleagues in the room, but we can turn it around. So long as the LEP board don't need to see it again and the content that the comments you've made will be reflected, it's not a challenging role.
We'd just welcome receiving the final version then. Great, thank you. Okay, I can't see any other comments or hands on that one. So I think that moves us on to the last agenda item, which is Martin, Chief Exec update.
Thanks, Lucy. That's very helpful. So as the final item, there are 3 or 4 quick things. First of all, with changes that are happening in government right now, we will continue just in good faith with progress on things such as LUF bid on transport, GBHQ and other programmes, and I have no doubt that Oliver will be engaging very quickly with new ministers as they are appointed. On GBHQ, I'm sure Peter will follow me and make a few points, but a very good news for all of us for South Yorkshire and our colleagues in Doncaster, the short list of 6. And just finally, in terms of LEP review, I think as agreed at the last meeting, the workshop has taken place, private sector members only, and I understand it was very productive. The Mayor, Oliver, has held early discussions with Lucy, and also we intend to complete and return the necessary LEP review pro forma to government this month. So thanks, Lucy.
Okay. Comments or questions for Martin at this stage? Oh, Peter, sorry. Yes, please.
Martin's already teed me up for this one, hasn't he? So the GBRHQ, I think the key thing now is the public vote. The one thing we've been very careful throughout the process to do is not to disparage or belittle any of the other bids. Our bid is very, very strong. We meet all the government criteria, and we want to get the vote out. Now, we have people in this room that are quite good at getting the vote out. So we need to get the vote out at MCA and local authority level, because this is a Team South Yorkshire matter. and I hope we can all pull together to really try and get to all members of society really to support this. It's going to produce jobs and opportunity for young people. That's a key message. It's helping the levelling up agenda. So please can we find a way of getting the vote out? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I think in that case the meeting can be drawn to a close. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.